Welcome back to Villanova Sports Talk here on this Thursday afternoon. Glad you could join us. David Szczepanski with you alongside Mike Micceri, and it is time for some Villanova men's lacrosse action. We'll preview the season coming up, which starts actually this weekend. February 9th will be their home opener coming up against number 12 Penn State. But as always, great to have Mike in the house as our WXVU lacrosse expert. Mike, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great, David. Thank you for having me. Really cool to be back and excited to talk some Villanova men's lacrosse.
As always, a new season already. The spring is already almost here, almost upon us.
Yeah.
Full season coming up for the men's lacrosse team, which is going to start, as I said, on Sunday against Penn State. But before we get into that, let's take a look at the preview and what happened last year for Villanova, Mike. Of course, a 9-7 overall year for the 2024 squad, 2-3 in conference play. But as we were talking a little bit about off air, Villanova ended the season with a great win against a very good University of Denver team, and then a tough loss against Georgetown, but went to overtime against the best team in the Big East. Georgetown once again picked as the first team in the Big East, or that's where we think most likely they're going to slide. So, Mike, just to quickly kind of recap last year's team. Pretty good season all in all when you look at it in its total.
Yeah, there were definitely a ton of ups and downs last season. I mean, some things went right early that didn't go right later in the season. Villanova's defense really started to come along, caused a lot of turnovers. Villanova lost some of those key players that caused turnovers last year. Steven Zupicic is a huge name. He was the starting LSM for Villanova last year. They lost him. He was a grad student. So there's a lot of things for Villanova to really be happy about going into this next season, but definitely a couple pieces that they're going to have to patch up before they get started in this 2025 lacrosse season.
So, Mike, when you look at the team last year, right, they gave up about 10 and a half goals per game. They scored a little bit more than that, almost 11, 10.8 to be exact. When you look at the team this year with a lot of the key players returning, especially Matt Licata, just to name, the captain, what area do you think Villanova really needs to improve on the most heading into the season?
So I like to be really nitpicky. I think that the biggest area that is often overlooked in lacrosse is the clearing game. The clearing game for Villanova was, to put it lightly, somewhat of a disaster last year. They were 63rd ranked out of 73 teams in NCAA, so they really needed to patch that up. They were clearing at about 83%. Good teams are really above 86, 87%, so that's definitely an area where Villanova needs to kind of, patch up a little bit. Their defense stayed pretty strong. They lost one of their defensive captains, Reed Cowell, last year, but this year they still have two starting defensemen from last season in Jack Shoemaker and David Evanchik. They're both captains this year, so hopefully they can kind of start that clear from their defensive end like most teams do, and then move up the field a little bit more polished than they did last year.
Let's also talk about the face-offs, because that was really important last year. Justin Coppola was injured kind of midway through the year, and you could see that Villanova did slide off a little bit there.
Right.
Just if you can talk about the importance of face-off game. We saw that a lot last year, especially in the middle and latter part of the season, and how the Wildcats are going to try to get going again with Coppola now graduated.
So face-offs in lacrosse, of course, always huge. When you get possession off from that face-off X, it really boosts your offense, gives confidence to your defense if your defense is on the back foot, gives them some time to catch a breather and, focus on the next possession. Villanova, like you said, struggled a little bit after Justin Coppola went down last year, and they got a transfer from Princeton. He's a grad student now at Villanova, Tyler Sandoval, and to me that's the complete difference maker this year. If I had to pinpoint one guy as who could really transform Villanova from a good team that they were at the end of last season and continue that into making them a great team this season, I think it's Tyler Sandoval. He's got to be great from the face-off X. He was about 500% last year, 50% last year at Princeton, and now at Villanova he can really have a chance to boost their offense right from the jump.
That's a big signing, too, for the Wildcats, right? Huge. Trying to find someone to replace Coppola, and seems like they found a really good face-off man for the Wildcats this year in Sandoval. Let's talk about the goalie situation here, Mike. Of course, Anthony Wilson, the freshman last year, there was a lot of high hopes, a lot of high expectations around him. How do you think he performed last year? And now heading into this year, they have a new freshman into the system, and Dennis Fargione. Can you just speak a little bit about the goaltending situation and kind of what you thought of Wilson's first year in college lacrosse?
So Wilson certainly had some really good games last year. He was a guy that he had some big shoes to fill. He came in and did his job. He was by no means the best goalie in college lacrosse, but he certainly did his job, played a role. I don't know with 100% confidence whether Villanova is going to start him as the goalie. I would presume that they will. However, like you said, I know they have Dennis Fargione, a freshman coming in from Garden City, New York, who performed really well in high school. Being a freshman coming into college lacrosse, there's a huge difference, of course. The transition is difficult. So I presume that it's still going to be Wilson to start the season, but I wouldn't be surprised if they slot Dennis Fargione in every once in a while and test him out. He, like I said, performed performed really well in high school, 68% save percentage. So it's going to be interesting what Villanova does in the crease.
Most definitely, Mike. Looking at the season as well, who would kind of be your star player to watch for the Wildcats this year? You know, the difference maker, the guy that you would highlight and say, if Villanova wants to have a good season, you know, make a big run in the Big East tournament once again, win more games, who has to be kind of that catalyst for the Wildcats?
So, of course, the grad student captain, as we mentioned, Matt Licata is always the guy. He's going to be the QB. You know the ball's going to go through him on pretty much every possession. He has great eyes. He assists. He scores. He does really everything right for that Villanova attack unit. But another guy on that unit that we talked about a lot last year is Colin Missioner. Missioner is coming back. He actually, I found out recently, played with a broken back for much of last season and still scored 37 goals for the Villanova Wildcats. So I think this season, if Missioner can come, he's fully healthy, he can be his full self that he was touted up to be coming out of high school. I think Missioner is going to be the huge piece that makes this Villanova attacking unit great. And he also has a brother who's a freshman, Gavin Missioner, who is really highly talked about. And I think that if you can get the Missioner tandem going early in the season, it'll be a really good sign for Villanova.
It's a lot of fun. Definitely something that we'll watch out. Both Licata and Missioner combined for 102 points last year.
Yeah.
Missioner 37 goals, Licata 36 goals to lead the team. The next closest player with goals 16 for Dan Martin. So a wide gap there for Licata and Missioner at the top. Mike, let's take a look at the schedule. I talked about Penn State. Villanova played Penn State last year.
Yeah.
A loss for the Wildcats, but they played some tough ranked teams early on in their schedule. They're going to do so once again, and they did play competitively there against the Nittany Lions. When you kind of look at the schedule, especially non-conference, we'll move to conference in a little bit, any games that really kind of jump out at you as games that are going to be really competitive for the Wildcats? Any games that, you know, our listeners out there should really focus on?
Well, I love the opening game against Penn State. Villanova opened against Penn State last year. They lost 18-10, so you know that they really have a bone to pick there. I think that's going to, of course, opening games always set the tone for the season, but this game especially, you're excited to see what happens to this Villanova offense. They lost Mason Reale last year, and Steven Zupicic they lost on the LSM side of the ball. So I'm excited to see how they set the tone early in the season, and then Big East play, of course, opens up on March 29th. That's always going to be fun to watch. They open against Denver. I believe that game is in Denver. Yeah, it's in Denver. So Villanova will be traveling to Denver, and that'll be a very interesting game to set the Big East, Big East Conference play at a good tone.
So 9 wins for the Wildcats last year, Mike, overall. How many wins do you see Villanova getting to this season?
So 9 wins last year.
This is the big question for everybody out there.
It's the big question. 9-7 last year. I could see Villanova, they still have a really solid defensive core. Obviously, we have a lot to see with the goalie play and a lot to see on the faceoff X. I think Tyler Sandoval is really going to boost that team. Villanova took a huge step back after Justin Coppola went down last year. So I think they could become a 12-13 win team this year if they're really playing at their best, clear the ball at a high percentage, and become a little bit more polished on the offense and man up play.
That's what we wanted to hear, Mike.
Yeah.
12, 13 wins from our lacrosse expert. Final question here, Mike. When you look at, the Big East, specifically Georgetown, of course, winning last year, we know how good the University of Denver was. Of course, Villanova eventually beating them in the tournament. Who do you think, just in terms of Big East outlook, is going to kind of lead the way in the conference, and who do you think is going to be at the top?
So I think, of course, the experts put Georgetown at the top of the Big East to start the season. Villanova was ranked 3rd, and then Denver was ranked 2nd. I think it's probably going to be Georgetown. They still have a ton of really good pieces. They're a very gritty, fast team, so I think Georgetown is really going to be the team to look out for and catch up to. But at the same time, I wouldn't sleep on Villanova, and I wouldn't sleep on Providence. Both of them got a lot of votes from experts to be a very competitive team in the Big East, and it's always fun watching Big East lacrosse. It's always up for grabs, and if Villanova comes out firing, they'll be a huge competitor in this conference.
Can't wait for the season to get started. Again, the home opener for the men's lacrosse team on February 9th, this Sunday at 12 p.m. at Villanova Stadium as they'll take on number 12 Penn State. We won't have any WXVU coverage on Sunday as Villanova men's basketball will be taking on Xavier at the Wells Fargo Center in South Philadelphia. However, we will have our first coverage of men's basketball on Saturday, getting confused, switching up the sports too much. We'll have our first coverage of men's lacrosse on Saturday, February 15th, as the Wildcats will take on Yale University at Villanova Stadium, also 12 p.m. opening faceoff. So looking forward to it. Just about 11 days until we get our coverage started for men's lacrosse here on WXVU. Just a few days, though, until the men's team gets ready to take on Penn State. So, Mike, as always, appreciate you joining me. We'll have you on throughout the rest of the season, and we'll get you on some broadcasts as well. So looking forward to another year, and hopefully the Wildcats can, as we talked about, get more than 9 wins this year and get back to the Big East tournament.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you for having me, David.
Sounds good, Mike. All right, we'll take a break here on Villanova Sports Talk. When we come back, we'll have much more action. Stay tuned, Nova Nation. You're listening to WXVU V89.1, The Roar.